Well, hello. Hello, everyone. Hopefully, my mic is. Oh, shoot. There's an echo. There we go. Got rid of that echo. Hopefully, it's coming through clear. Yeah. It's good to see everybody here. Sorry for the mix up on the time and everything. I had originally scheduled for 8 and I have moved it to 9. I just forgot to officially tell YouTube that I did. Oh, oops. And there you go. Mm. I know. You know what, Beck? I'm not blaming on you. I just wanted to know where he was. Yeah. Anyway, welcome everybody. It's nice to see my mods. Thank you for being here. Hey, Juju B, T King, Sean Coffee. Thank you all for hanging out. Thank you, Jin, for coming back. Yeah. Are you watching him? Is he behaving? Yeah, make sure he behaves. Although that's really not going to be possible, I don't think. Hi, Mippy. It's good to see you too. Beck, Charlie. Don't be like that. Boo. Boo. Don't be like that. Behave. Anyway, we're going to cover the Masterson Re-Trial, which started on Monday, actually, everything. But there was some stuff going on prior to the actual first day of court, which was Monday. Judge Olmedo keeping it all on track. You know how much we appreciate Judge Almeida and her rulings, how calm she was, how she keeps it together. Her point on law has been very good. It's been difficult, as you all know, with the first trial, which ended in a mistrial with a hung jury that could not agree. Um, Actually, the percentages of what they believed in the Jane Does was rather low. They actually said they didn't even really go to any of the other testimony. They basically, on the exit interviews, everyone was saying they really didn't look at any evidence. They really only went by perceptions and statements from the attorneys. It was rather disheartening. And a few things have changed for this trial. Um, and some would consider for the better. It depends on where you weigh on this. I've been covering this for quite a long time. Um, I do believe that Danny Masterson deserves a fair trial. But I do believe he did deserve to come back to trial. That this needs to be settled. This is a huge issue. I realize that there are people that think it's so long, it's over with, it was years and years ago, they just need to let it go. But no, I don't. Because for me, there are two things about this trial that, although the subject is rather tenuous, rather distasteful to deal with, okay, it's not fun. Nobody thinks it's fun. But there are two legal issues here that are always going to be of interest to me. And that is the way we legally transcribe, define, and prosecute and or defend consent in American law. Consent in many states is different. We have some federal guidelines on it. Judge Almeida here for this particular trial has defined the definition of the charges as not having consent for penetration. And that's what she's calling it. But during this trial, we also have the issue of when someone is asleep, when someone is in a relationship, when there have been prior acts of consensual intercourse. All of these things affect consent in different ways legally. However, we do all based on fries, okay, based on our actual understanding in 2023. All of you, men, women, everyone in chat, everyone on YouTube, we all know no means no, that consent is not a permanent condition, that it's fluid, just like our relationships, our communications, and our actual dealings with everyone. Consent is a fluid thing. It's not consent for everything, it's consent for whatever you two have decided to do together on your own. Okay. But it is what you have decided together and that it has to be acknowledged. I'm not saying you need a 72-page document or a 3-hour conversation before you get down and do whatever makes you happy. But I am saying you need some kind of consensus for consent. And this has always been something that I have followed legally. It is one of the reasons I got involved with legal and how fascinating it was to me when I noticed the differences from court to court and state to state and case to case and how it was interpreted. And then I realized that actual law, when interpreted, is up for speculation and argument on what proof and words can change. And if person says a word one way and one person says a word another way, you could be talking about two different things. Same thing with consent through all the legal briefs that I read. The other legal issue in this case that is up front and center is how long it took for the charges to actually come forward because of statute of limitations. And there has been from state to state and case to case changes to the statute of limitation in regards to trauma victims, those in regard to physical beating, sexual abuse, like in this case. Okay. And also, we've got the little tidbit of adding Scientology to it as the extra reason why we didn't get come forward and actually tell anybody that these occurrences happened because of our belief in Scientology, because of what Scientology taught us about how what happened couldn't have happened, because according to Scientology, it doesn't exist. Yes, that came out in the first trial. According to Scientology, it is impossible for the R word to exist. No. Wait. Oh, I know, Mrs. How dare I, right, Mrs. Cassandra? Oh, I said the S word. Oh no, like, but actually in this trial, it's different. They're not allowed to say we're not going to mention Scientology because one of the biggest changes. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Right on track we go because one of the biggest changes is Judge Almeida has expanded some of how Scientology can come in. You know, I'm telling you, she expanded it to include exactly what Scientology actually teaches, proposes, what their policies are in regards to how these kind of things get reported. Not only are the women now to say how they felt it was that Scientology was telling them, they're allowed to bring a witness forward on the teachings of Scientology and the actual policy and behaviors and what is actually taught to the women in regards to this situation. That witness was on the list and tried to come in the first trial. That witness is going to be Claire Headley, who is now approved for this trial to come forth for the prosecution to give that testimony on how Scientology does things like that. And one of the twists that we learned about this week is that the defense, knowing that Claire Headley is coming on as that expert and allowed to speak about Scientology, well, Philip Cohen, if you remember, Philip Cohen, the defense attorney who was with Danny the first go around, he is coming around again as head chair, I do believe, although that hasn't been decided, but we'll get to that. He actually will be bringing a witness forward on the prosecution list to go against Claire Headley. And where do you hear this? It's none other than her own stepfather, an OT8 Sea Org member, pretty high up, by the name of Hugh Martin Witt. Yes, how do you like that? That's a total Scientology move, isn't it? Intimidation. Pretty bold, isn't it? Well, we'll just bring your dad up here to contradict everything you said. Your stepfather, rather. I thought that was pretty telling. I know I'm so happy that she is too, that she gets to speak on it. Okay. Before we get into all of the tidbits, let me bring up some of the players again. Okay. So we know who we're talking about here. And then I'm going to let you decide which picture you want to know. Let's talk a little bit about the players right now. Danny Masterson, first day of trial, finally. This is the first picture of him for the retrial. His hair's in a little bit better. He looks a little more relaxed than he did when last time, a little bit. Still looking a little older, but dressing a little bit sharper. I'm glad he got rid of that light blue suit. He really looked terrible in it. It was not good for him. Judge Olmedo, Charlaine Olmedo, as I said, like that's what he looked like in the first trial. So you can see he is looking a little more relaxed, a little more like the Danny Masterson we all know. And I think that that's on purpose. I think his hair is a little bit longer and he looks a little bit relaxed and refined, just like his character on TV. I think they're going to play for the nice guy we all thought he was. But that's just my opinion. I think it's a smart move for the defense. If they are doing that consciously, I think it was pretty clever. Here is Judge Charlaine Almedo. She will again be the judge throughout the whole thing. And she has run roughshod all week. She has kept on straight. We have a jury, by the way. We have a jury. This is Sean Hawley and Philip Cohen. This is the defense team. Now, Sean Hawley has always been on the defense team. And one of the first things I wanted to talk to you about is that Sean Hawley is now front and center again. Now, she missed the first trial based on her coverage. She actually was excused and was actually defending Trevor Bauer, a baseball player, with multiple accusations against him, kind of along the lines of Danny Masterson. She is a pretty big public, a celebrity attorney, so to speak. She takes big, high-profile cases. She's a tough cookie. Danny Masterson's lucky to have her. We all know Philip Cohen did the best that he could, along with Karen Goldstein in the first trial, and they did a pretty damn good job. Cohen constantly bringing up the fact that we were talking about Scientology. And does anybody remember how many mistrials he actually called for? It was quite a lot. It was almost every day for a while. He was actually, wanted thrown out of court. Which brings me to this tidbit. A couple of days before we had our court date of Monday that just started on the 17th, Philip Cohen tried again. He wanted a delay. A delay. Yes. He asked Judge Almedo to delay everything. Okay. It was a late requested hearing on Danny Masterson criminal case because Philip Cohen said that her rulings of the past few days, allowing a fifth accuser by the name of Kathleen Jenkins. Yes, we not only have the three Jane Does testifying, and also Tricia Vassy, who was allowed as victim number 4 to testify for prior acts. We now have Kathleen Jenkins coming forward, which would be number 5, also being admitted testimony as a prior act. Judge Almedo ruled it was okay. And she also ruled that Claire Headley could testify as an expert witness on Scientology. And so Philip Cohen decided he needed more time. Well, she denied it. She said, "You've known about Claire Headley all along." Okay. You've known about Claire Headley all along. You don't get that. She there will be some it's kind of curious to hear, Tony Ortega again is the one in the courtroom, is the one giving us all the reporting. Remember, there are no cameras. We don't even get audio on this. We get nothing. If Tony Ortega doesn't put it out there for everybody in the news, and I'm telling you, he's putting it out 2 or 3 times a day for everybody who's doing YouTube, for everybody who's writing articles. Tony's putting it out for everybody the same way, all the information that he can. He's sharing everything. He is doing his YouTube video takes on it. So please, he's linked below in my description. Give him a sub, give him a share. Make sure if you have a question or you want to see a video on it, check him out first before you go scouting around to the other ones. Because I'm telling you, they're all getting the information from him anyway. Okay, even the ones that say they've got like secret spies and all that other stuff. Believe me, Tony's got the real deal. He's got all the connections there, and I think he deserves to be checked out first. Well, that's my opinion. You do what you do. I'm just saying I'm going to list him as a source constantly because, yay, I'm reading all his stuff constantly and the articles, and it's all coming from him. Okay. So Cohen, really was quite upset. about Claire Headley being added, about the extra witness. Like, um, they actually wanted more time. They needed more time to prepare. He said at the first trial, the word Scientology never came out of my mouth. I beg to differ. I think that Philip Cohen mentioned Scientology more than anybody else in this trial. Now, he may not have done it in front of the jury as often, but he did it 2, 3, 4, 5 times a day to everybody else, to the prosecution, in his objections, in his motions to Judge Olmedo, in his complaints, which, if I recall, were daily to Judge Almeida. Every morning he had something to say about somebody did something, or somebody said, referred to Scientology some way, you know, and it was just not, you know, he was really, really, too much. Okay. They felt that they definitely needed to do investigation work on what might be said. Okay. Um, but, she wasn't hearing it. She just didn't want to hear his arguments. Okay. He argued that they need to add due process for the defendant first and foremost. That it's not, just that's not just a compelling reason. That is the number one reason. When changes are made to witness lists and things like that. But I must remind you that Philip Cohen also added people to his witness list. I mean, he never brought anybody forward in the first trial. He did have Bree Schaefer on there and a couple of other people. Now he has Daniel Buffington, a forensic toxicologist. He's got Scott Fraser, a neurophysiologist who studies nerve disease. Like, I'm wondering what that's going to be all about. And a Dr. Mitch Eisner, who's a memory expert. As well as I said, Hugh Martin Witt, which is Claire Headley's stepfather, to speak on the practices of Scientology. Mueller pushed back on these requests. They're opposed to they were opposed to any continuance at this time. Obviously, um, they're they are not aware of any additional investigations or works that need to be done because everybody knew about this. They already knew about Kathleen J. They already knew about Claire Headley. These were all things that were prior put out. It was just that Judge Almeida said it was okay to bring them in. It's not like the prosecution didn't tell them what they were thinking of doing all along. So, like, if Cohen didn't take it seriously enough to prepare just in case, well, hey, sorry. If you don't do your what in cases or what ifs, Judge Almeida is not giving you a free pass for time. Like sloppy, sloppy lawyer stuff, as far as she's concerned. She ain't doing it. So when Mueller started to go against what Cohen was saying as to why they needed this extension, Judge Almeida just jumped right in and just interrupted. Um, she wanted all the dates of when people first heard of things and stuff like that. She wanted to know, why the prosecution was actually switching out their memory expert, because they're no longer going to have Mindy Mechanic. If you remember from the first trial, Mindy Mechanic was talking about the effects of trauma and all of these things and confusion and everything on memory when you've got a traumatic event, how you could remember or not remember, how it can make for inconsistency. So she did a really good job of laying it out there that a lot of things do affect your memory, and they were actually bringing that forward because there were some parts of all three of the women's testimony that here or there, because of the numbers of times they were the investigative people took reports from them, the number of people they reported it to, the number of times there's been testimony and depositions given, words here and there were slightly different, memories changed or evolved, new things did come up. Okay. Sometimes things were mentioned, sometimes they weren't. Now, Philip Cohen, for the defense, called those inconsistencies. Um, Mindy Mechanic called those, that's just how it goes. That's the process. Like, that's how it happens. She did a good job of that. But for this one, they're going to be giving an essay trauma syndrome expert, Dr. Barbara Ziv, who actually is from the East Coast here. I believe she's a Pennsylvania through Temple University, but she has actually written articles and done tours all over on this subject and promotes about how, again, trauma, especially SA trauma, can affect memory, your willingness to address the issue, bring forth memories, and etc., and why some of these inconsistencies can be there. So, she wanted to know the dates on when this all happened, when the defense was notified to make sure everybody was prepared. Um, they know that he also, the prosecution also brought forward that they had informed all of the victims in regards to this case about the request for the delay, and that several of them are absolutely opposed to it. They do not want a continuance. They're asking the prosecution to speak for them to the judge to say that they're ready to go. They don't want any further delay unless it's absolutely necessary. Based on all of that, the judge will say that the defense has had plenty of time. She does not think that it should go for it. And as you know, it went through on Monday. So there you go. hmm They still are not making it about Scientology. She still has limited the scope to actually what is actually going on with Scientology in regards to what the women believed and how they came forward. Period. That was all that she was going to do. Um, she still is holding that line. She's expanded it a little more to allow the expert witnesses to come in and speak on the policies, to explain it further, because she feels that in the first trial, the jury didn't hear enough to understand how the women could have felt the way they felt. And I think she's right there, and I think that's a good ruling, because if she feels that they did not have enough information, then the scope was too small, because it has to be fair to both sides. Now, we don't want to necessarily blame Danny Masterson for being a Scientologist, okay? But the fact of the matter is, Danny was a Scientologist. All of the women who are reporting against him were Scientologists at the time. They did go to Scientology to try to follow the rules to report it to them. Certain things happened to make them believe that these things were normal when they weren't. They then experienced a lapse once they left Scientology. They became aware of what happened to them is exactly what they felt happened to them and wrong. And everything unfolds from there. So, in order for the jury to have the big picture on how it happened, that was it. I mean, she expanded the scope just slightly, not a lot, but just enough that expert witnesses can now talk about the policies of Scientology. Claire Headley's in, so is their counter witness, her stepfather. So that's going to be really interesting to watch. Okay. That all happened before Monday. Okay. Uh, So, uh, again, this is D.A. Mueller, Reinhold Mueller. That's another older picture from the first trial of Danny Masterson, and I keep showing you it because he did not look as well as he looks today in that picture. He seems a little more confident today when he first went into trial. Guess having a mistrial under your belt kind of gives him hope, and it does actually make it a little more difficult for D.A. Mueller, but I have every confidence they're going to lay it out. Both Philip Cohen and D.A. Mueller had interviewed the jury as they left for the mistrial. Once the mistrial was up, they were actually did question the jury. Okay, this is a picture of Claire Headley, who is going to be testifying. Okay, so now we have the players all back in place. I think what picture should we go back to? I think I'm going to go back to Mr. Masterson for a while first. Okay. Also on the defense's witness list was Bree Schaefer. Now, Bree Schaefer was on the list the first time around, okay, but she did not get called by either the defense, and she was on the prosecution list. She didn't get called by them either. Okay, she is an assistant to Danny Masterson, and she was always also friendly with several of the Jane Does. And could give corroborating testimony either for or against. She was mentioned in the testimony several times when they were giving their accounts of what happened. Okay, so she was around a lot. It's curious that they're not actually they didn't bring her the first time, but I can kind of understand. I can kind of understand. So, okay. So the first day of trial, okay, it's not actually the trial, but jury selection, so to speak. They actually Judge Olmedo uh is letting Tony Ortega, he's in the room. He is the jury pool. I mean, he is the pool reporter, so to speak, the one taking everything. He happily agreed to do it. He's doing his best to take detailed notes. I'm very happy for him. He's been sending you exactly the same pool report that the journalists receive. So, like I said, everything that's going out for YouTube and everything from his reporting, from his underground bunker reporting, and from his daily reports is the same that's going out to everyone. They expected that Monday would be a short session. She gave opening address to all the potential jurors. There were like 200 of them there. They were going to start questioning, and some things came up in the questioning that were quite interesting throughout the week. It didn't all happen on Monday. They focused on several things. At one point, they brought up DNA. They were asking jurors if without DNA you could actually convict someone of a crime. They literally said that. And they were using it as a point of, like, if you felt that you absolutely had to have DNA, fingerprints, and all this other stuff to commit a crime, they were excluding them. Because if you'll remember, these things happened years and years ago. There's not going to be DNA evidence for that. It's not going to come up. And so it's kind of important, since I was really happy to see that, because that means that when they questioned the jury afterwards and they heard that they didn't actually look at anything because they didn't feel there was any physical evidence of anything. And they thought that that was important, and it actually added to their disbelief. So their belief that the fact that no physical evidence of assault was presented besides the recollections of the three women was paramount to the case. Seriously, because if they had that prior notion when they went in there, nothing that happened in that courtroom was going to change their mind because of how old these cases are. Nothing. And so that was a big thing to weed out. So I was happy that they started talking about that. They started talking about what they think DNA is, what they think it proves, and whether or not they think it's necessary. And several people were weeded out based on it. They were allowed to ask questions on regards to if they knew what Scientology was, if they were aware of Danny Masterson. One of them was a huge fan of Danny Masterson. He just loves him as an actor and this, that, and the other thing. And he's still in there. He was still in the jury pool at the end there. There's some speculation and articles going along about that one. I don't really think that's a big deal. There was also a jury member who was related somehow to a friend or an associate who was actually a printer of the Scientology documents or booklets or something like that, part of the printing of everything that they do. So he had a loose association, not anything drastic. But a lot of these juror numbers had really high numbers. And so as I was reading what Tony Ortega was pulling out, like he rightly said, Judge Ortega, like usually they had a pretty loose acceptance, especially in the prosecution. Prosecution was pretty well okay with just about everybody coming in. They really didn't use a lot of objections at all, and they could have got the fan out if they wanted, and or the one who had the exception to the printing company for Scientology, but they didn't exercise them. Philip Cohen had the most objections and pulled the most people out based on belief and things like that. Things that he didn't like, associations, whether they knew too much about what was going on. Tried their best, but they actually set a jury pretty darn quickly. We've got 7 women and 5 men. Okay. And we've got 8 alternates this time because remember, during the mistrial, we actually had 2 alternates up there because of COVID testing and everything that we had to pull in some people. So she has 8 chosen this time, and they are equally 4 women and 4 men. Okay. So we have heavy women on the jury this time coming in 7 to 5. Which, I don't really know what to think about that. I'm curious to see what you guys think about that. If that's how that might weigh either way. For me, mm, for me, it's not, that telling of a deal. Okay. Um, in regards to the jury, there really was one rather humorous incident where one of the jurors actually brought forth a note from a doctor saying that he could not do jury duty because he couldn't wear shoes. Okay. Now, Judge Olmedo thought this was a rather unique excuse. Um, and she was like, she asked her court assistant there. Well, he brought it in. She said, yes. She says, well, was he wearing shoes when he came in? She goes, oh, yeah, he was. They were really nice shoes, too. And she, well, how did you notice his shoes? He goes, because they looked so comfortable in black. They were shoes like I would buy. And she said, he literally wore shoes to bring this letter in to get excused from jury duty for not wearing shoes. Like, well, he's in. He could not get excused. He was sitting over there. I don't think he's sitting on the jury, but he didn't get excused. He had to go through the questions. She wasn't having it. The whole courtroom laughed. It was pretty good. It was a pretty good story. And if you know from the prior charge, I mean, Judge Almeida's got a pretty good sense of humor. She really does. And right now, she was the reason there are some delays. They've been trying to get the jury questionnaires and all done. There's been some gaps. They've been starting a little later. There's some days that they couldn't. They're not there today at all. Okay, because she was in a really high profile case right now, pretty nasty gang related cartel kind of case, and it's just about wrapping up. But she's ready to go. Like she's not holding anything back. She just needed a few late starts in the morning period as she tied some things up. You know, I know. Harold, I know. It's like, sorry, Judge, I can't wear shoes or underwear or shower ever. She would have been better if they expanded it a little bit. I think the shower thing would have got her, Harold. I think that would have got him out, but not the shoes, you know. Yeah. You did not use that same excuse last week about the shoes. Did you get out of it with the shoes? Harold, don't say it so. Oh my gosh. Oh, Wrecker, you just got notified about the stream? Wow. Maybe because I changed the time? Eh, Oh, by the way, everybody, I need your help. I need your help because YouTube apparently has decided like I'm like even like I'm in the gray zone somewhere over there. Like all of my stuff is green and it goes live and like we're going live and then as soon as we end the live, they turn it yellow until I complain. And then like the next day they turn it green again, which means you lose the algorithm for the whole day. It's like they're trying to shove me in some hole somewhere in like I'm resisting. I'm definitely resisting and I need your help too. So don't forget, as I put my fancy dancy banner on before my friend Quiz comes and sends me a memo. Thank you very much. Or Wrecker or Charlie or someone. That please, I would appreciate you like, share, and comment. Subscribe if you haven't. And share it if you know anyone that's interested in this trial because it's gonna be lit. We're gonna do updates every week, possibly more than one, depending on what happens. Because like I said, this is refreshing. Because this one actually is about legal issues that I actually want to follow and document the precedent that gets put in. Okay. One of the precedents already was the way that Judge Almedo defined forcible rape. Okay. Another part of the legal precedent was the way that DA Mueller brought through 3 cases together. Okay. Because of the limitations to statute of limitations, it had to be a multiple offense to go against Danny Masterson because there had to be a pattern there and more than one victim to say that the extenuating circumstances of not being able to report the trauma of the event and the repeating pattern of the accusations all came into another loophole of filing under the statute of limitations for Danny Masterson, which are actually the reason that he is actually facing 45 years to life. Okay. And one of the reasons that Cohen keeps saying he needs more time is because Danny's life is so seriously at risk here. 45 years to life is a serious thing. But I'm sorry. I agree with Judge Olmedo. It's not like you didn't know that from the beginning, Philip Cohen. Like, don't give me your boo-boo sob stories because you're off doing something else. You've had this case for years. You know what the prosecution is going to be bringing forward for a long time. Okay. Don't stop. I mean, he does do his best. He's really good. He's a very good defense attorney. I really can't. I mean, he does his best. He went so close to violating 402 protection for sexual assault victims in his questioning of the Jane Does that I could literally, without being in that courtroom, see Judge Olmedo at the edge of his seat ready to hit him with the judge's gavel. And she did quite a few times interrupt him and say he was going too far. And oh, by the way, Philip Cohen's not to mention the fact that the Jane Doe peed outside the car and tried to infer that she was drunk. And again, she already told him straight out in the pretrial hearing, don't do that again. Don't. She did. She told, nope, it's out. He can't. I forgot to tell you that when we talked about the pretrial hearing. But, when I start talking about Philip Cohen, all these memories come back from the first trial. Well, anyway. I'm glad to see that you didn't get out of jury duty for the shoes, Harold, because nobody should wear shoes to bring an excuse to the judge while they're wearing shoes to say they can't be there because they can't wear shoes. Like, seriously, you know. Oh, you see, I don't know. I don't want to get out of jury duty. I know, record. The banner's up. The banner's up. Okay. All right. So, anyway, we have a jury. Okay. Judge Olmedo also wanted to know who was going to be primary for the defense, and she gave him till Thursday to say, but I didn't see any reporting on them saying actually who was actually going to be the lead. Sean Hawley, who's a banging big attorney, or Philip Cohen, who's also done a great job for Danny Masterson, and he's been lead all along. Actually, but I did hear, and do have, all right, this is one of those things that I'm going to repeat that I haven't checked by 3 sources. I've only got one, but they did say that Sean Hawley would not be the one cross-examining the Jane Does. It would be Philip Cohen again. And, well, he did do a good job of trying to undermine their statements by saying they all were actually conspiring together to bring a civil suit and a criminal suit against Danny Masterson. The criminal suit being only against Danny Masterson to add credibility to the civil suit so they could win money. This is what he laid out for the jury. Okay. And also with his level of guilt chart, which was fascinating. And also that if there's any doubt at all, he didn't do it, which is not necessarily true. You can have some doubt as to things, but if the overwhelming evidence is more predominant towards you actually think he did do it, then he did. Okay. And actually, D.A. Mueller did a good job of that in closing arguments, explaining that. And hopefully, he will bring it front and center on opening remarks on Monday with the same thing. Judge Olmedo actually did let Philip Cohen know that there would be careful regulation of 402 and protection of assault victims' rights on the stand. They will not bring any prior acts up that the women did. No prior sexual activity of the women is allowed to be brought in. That's standard in California, where they have very severe protections in place for victims that testify. You're not allowed to go with them like that. Okay. Philip got close to the line. Philip Cullen got close to the line a few times during the previous trial. And I think Judge Olmedo is pretty aware of that. She was uncomfortable with it, and she's going to be pushing back a little bit more. She's in the situation where she is the judge. It's her courtroom. She's going to make sure it's fair for both sides. Okay. She's allowing the stuff in with Scientology. She allows them to counter it all. They're allowed other witnesses to come up. The prosecution also has witnesses on there about toxicology. They are bringing forth an officer that is allowed to speak about the effects and how people present their stories and things that are told in his experience as an officer, not with direct contact with any of the Jane Does, but just to give the jury an overview of how being under the influence of something can change behavior in reporting. This is also big to help bolster up some of what didn't occur in the first trial with the jury was their understanding of the fact that they were altered at the time, and why they can actually go to the fact that they were altered based on behaviors and based on reporting and things that happened, that you don't need a toxicology positive report to understand that somebody may have been under the influence of something. Now, in the first trial, nobody accused Danny of actually doing anything like that. And they still probably will not, because they do not have physical evidence to back it up. And it wouldn't be a smart move to say something like that without it. However, all of the women in their testimony, including the women that were not charging him, victim number 4, and from what I understand, victim number 5, Kathleen, who's going to be testifying, all will speak about being given something to drink by Danny Masterson, and then will speak on the fact of how things changed for them. They fuzzy thoughts, not able to control their body, even blackouts, waking up someplace they weren't before, waking up undressed when they know they were dressed, these kinds of things. And this actual officer is going to report on that that's common with this type of event. He's going to report that he's heard that report. It's still like this all fits the pattern of what he knows to be happening out there in these situations. So that was also part of the pretrial hearing. And of course, the defense is not very happy about that either. Okay. So it's going to be probably one of the main reasons that they have a toxicologist, a forensic toxicologist on the list, to talk about memory and how under the influence these things happen, to push against the memory expert, Barbara Ziv, who's going to be talking about, in particular, assault victims with memory and toxicology. Okay, so it's going to be expert against expert in quite a few parts here. It's not just going to be the testimony of the Jane Does at this time. There's going to be a lot more to it. They still have all of the supporting witnesses. Some of them that aren't on there are the friend of Jane Doe who kind of changed his story, like after meeting somebody in a hallway. Please go back to my playlist and look that one up. That guy was hella sus. That whole thing was hella sus. That's all I'm going to say on that. I kind of agree. That was some kind of setup. That was foul. Of course, he's not on the prosecution list this time. It's not even pertinent. Why give him a chance to get up there and perjure himself again? It was ridiculous. There are the support of friends and family, the mom of one of the Jane Does again, the husband of one of the Jane Does, okay, friends, and mostly more experts added to the list. Otherwise, the list pretty much stays the same as far as witnesses. Another really juicy tidbit that I want to give you, which kind of got Tony Ortega in a little bit of hot water. He has great humor about it, but it had to be kind of scary. It seems like during one of the days of jury selection and testimony, there was a request from Sean Hawley to see a subpoena in regards to a grand jury investigation with the subjects of Scientology and Danny Masterson. Yes, I said that. Grand jury investigation involving Scientology and Danny Masterson. Now, of course, Tony Ortega, being one of the most prominent reporters and journalists in regards to Scientology shenanigans and the legal cases, all the legal cases, not just this one, all the legal cases, his ears must have just perked right up because they said it in open court. Then they went to sidebar. But where he was sitting, he heard a little bit more. And he heard that it was still, when Judge Olmedo asked the prosecution if that was an active investigation, he said yes. Well, Tony reported it that way. And Judge Olmedo took exception to that, and she reamed him a good one when he came back in. And he was asking if everybody was going to put aside some bail money for him, because if he does anything like that again. Now, I understand if they said it in open court, it should be able to say it. But there are some things. Well, first of all, I kind of agree. You really don't want to interfere with an ongoing grand jury investigation of any nature. And they're not supposed to be public knowledge. So I do get her point about, hey, don't do that. Okay. But I also get Tony's like, oh my God, there's an investigation going on still. Wow. Who knew? Well, now we do. And apparently, Sean Hawley wanted some subpoena in regards to it. And because it's an ongoing investigation, Judge Almeida shot it down. No. Nope. Not going to get it. Can't have it. It's an ongoing investigation. You're not entitled to it and you don't need it. There you go. Nice way to try to get more information on what's going on, and I don't really blame them. Sean Hawley is also big guns when it comes to defense, and I can imagine that the rest of this trial is going to have plenty of shenanigans going on back and forth. For me, it'll be great because I like when the lawyers are doing it. I hate when the people are doing it, like those other two cases. Those women, that Starch and that Vallow case, those women are driving me crazy. They're the ones causing all the shenanigans. I can't stand it. I want the lawyers doing the shenanigans. That's where my vibe is. But, hey, we're going to finish because we started it and everybody seems to be rather interested in those two. But we all are developing a great distaste for the two of them, I'm sure. The more we have to say their names, the more cranky I get. So I'm going to stick with this one more. Well, this one has more legal enticement, let's say. I think it's going to be very good to keep an eye out on how they start talking about the consent. Now, in my descriptions, I link you some studies and surveys in regards to the statistics of women, of partners, let's just say, in a relationship who have been violated by someone they know they're in an intimate relationship with, an ongoing thing, while they were asleep or unconscious. When you read those percentages, you're going to be shocked. It's very, very high. It is apparently very common. And in most cases, because there was prior consensual activity, many don't report it. They talk to their partners about it or they try to. Some people break up over it. Some people just learn to accept it. Some people have actual therapy because of it, because they can't wrap their head around how they didn't become a consenting adult anymore once they fell asleep. It can be traumatic. But it is actually quite intriguing for me because the statistics were through the roof. And apparently, I'm waiting to see if that comes up in court. I am. Because the actual legal definition of consent doesn't consider it, especially not in this case so far. I'd like to see some precedents on it. I'd like to see not only justice for the Jane Does who feel that they were violated against their will. If they feel that way, they need justice in some case. This has to come to an end, one way or another. Okay. And when it does, I want to see some good standing law on precedents for statutory limitations. I want to see some amendments statewide, everywhere, or even federally, about trauma victims, not just assault victims, but those that go through a traumatic event like attempted killing. Somebody tries to murder you, okay, and you've got your head all messed up or you're in the hospital for a year, you should be able to still go after that person. Or if you get into a bar fight, you get beat to a pulp and end up in a coma or whatever, or you get messed up to where you have something going on with your head and some type of trauma that you cannot think clearly, okay, and it's documented, you should get extended statute of limitations. Now, there are some laws that do that already to some extent, but I'd like to see it go further, especially for those that are going through trauma. Here on the East Coast, we have what happened in New York based on the diocese. They did put into effect that that children could, as they became adults and these memories came forward, they were allowed to press charges. Okay, and they just recently opened up that window for a year to any adult survivor of sexual assault. Any adult survivor. You didn't have to be a child when it happened anymore. It could have been at any time. They opened it for a year that regardless of when the assault happened, you could come forward and make a claim civilly. It had to pass muster to get a criminal case. It still had to go through the process. But civilly, you were allowed to mention it. You were allowed to go after somebody for it, which is what E. Jean Carroll just did with ex-President Trump. She had a defamation suit against him because she's talked about her assault for quite some time. And he has attacked her both while he was president and while he wasn't. Okay, so there are two lawsuits going on, and I covered that on Monday if you want to check on that one if you haven't already. Well, we're going to be following that because next week that starts. Part two starts over there. They have the first lawsuit is still in appeals because he was president when he said the first defamation statements against her rather rudely from a podium while being president. So there's some legal back and forth on whether he was acting in the best interest of his employer, the United States, all of us, when he went after her with all of that nasty stuff he said. So that's going back and forth. Washington recently just kicked it back to Manhattan. They don't want to judge on it. There's not an information there. They actually think that it could be a personal attack, even if you were president at the time, because you may not have been acting in the employer's best interest or on anything that the employer would advise or ask you to do for them. And there was a whole bunch of other stuff there. It was a very long decision, which I linked in the video for you if you just from Monday if you decide to read it. I kind of put it in a little couple sentences for you there, but that was the gist of it. Um, Back to Masterson, he doesn't get that courtesy. Um, because the assaults didn't happen anywhere over here in New York, they didn't have that 1 year window. They had to actually use the loophole that DA Mueller did by having multiple people that were doing it. And Cohen is actually trying to use that against them because of how it was filed and that they knew each other or that they've even talked. There are some similarities in all of their stories based on how things happened or how the incidences occurred. One thing in common is they all knew him. They were all in relationship of some type with him at the time. Um, they all have similar stories in regards to beverages, losing time, waking up places they didn't know, not knowing things that happened, being confused, um, having relations at one point, saying no to other things, and having things still happen. These are all consistent with all three of the stories, and I would imagine we're going to get the same testimony. They're going to be allowed to bring the detectives back in again to go over all of the different reports and why the reports were different ways. They're going to be able to actually talk about that, but they're not going to be able to actually defame the police department. Judge Olmedo has made it clear that you could talk about the actual report taking and what the individual did in regards, but you won't talk about the scope of their job in any negative way back there. And that came forward in the first trial because of the bad reputation of the particular police department that they reported for. There was some innuendos and some things that were done. The Judge Olmedo, she don't play. Like, you're not going to do that. That's not what the law is for. We want facts, none of that. And we're not, and that police force is not the ones on trial here. Danny Masterson is. And that police force is not the one bringing the charges. So we don't get to go with them. It's the Jane Doe's. Okay. So she's pretty clear about that. And I agree with her on that line. That just muddies the waters even more and unnecessarily. I'm going to look through for some questions And then, wow, I think I'm going to be wrapping up in an hour with you guys here. That was short and sweet because really we only had the pre-trial stuff and the juries and some shenanigans. And I'm grateful that Tony Ortega didn't land his ass in jail, and I hope you all are too, so that we'll have reporting. There was no court today, but opening statements start on Monday and first witnesses. Mm-hmm. Okay. Hi, Sheil. It's good to see you. Do they give you a reason as to why they disqualify you? Often they don't. It's based on your questions, and sometimes they do. They will if they remove you during the trial after you've already been seated. They will talk to you and question you, Juju, in regards to jury sitting. Um, I know, Juju. I'm not saying delightful. That would not be a word. She says, who thought this case would be a delightful reprieve? I did not see that coming. Legally, it is for me because that's what kind of why I do this. It's for that little bit of legal intrigue that's in each, and there has to be something intriguing in regards to it for me. This has more going for it, and I've been following it for a while. So it's actually refreshing to actually talk about those kind of things instead of the horrific things we've had to talk about lately in the other charts. But I didn't see it coming either, really, because you would. Well, I'm sure when it comes to the testimony, there will not be any thrills or trills in my voice. I'm sure we can then focus on the actual wrongness of the actual case itself. Juju, I would like to hear your theory on cases like this because there was a lot going back and forth in regards to this. I told you about the DNA. I also they talked about the multiple windows that a baseball hits and breaks through one window, and you're like, how many people can you actually blame for the same incident? Things like this. They actually were using scenarios that Philip Cohen got really upset with D.A. Mueller about, and he complained. But the judge didn't think it was that bad. She just clarified the law on the matter of how to go about looking at evidence and how to go about it. It's up to the jury what part do they believe or don't believe in this. Um, eh, she kind of clarified it all because it was a kind of a weird story that not many of them were actually understanding what D.A. Mueller meant. I even got lost on some of it, but eh, I think he was just trying to say that you've got three people here all telling the same story. The fact is, something happened, and we've got to decide whether Danny Masterson has to pay for that in some way and how he will. Whether they think that he actually did that. Well, the fact about the DNA evidence and things like that, that was really important because this is a case that doesn't have that. It doesn't. It's not your standard sexual assault case. Oh, we should all have a stream one day about sitting on jury duty. If the case is over and everything, we should all talk about that process. I want to know how many murder minions or you fans of true crime actually have sat on a jury. Okay. I think that's kind of cool. So most people try like anything to get out of jury duty. They really do. Um, okay. So on that, I think we're going to put Danny Masterson to bed. And I will see you all tomorrow for our weekend show at 10 o'clock. What the actual, and it is actually 10 o'clock, not 9 o'clock, not 8 o'clock. I actually checked. I will definitely be scheduling it for 10 o'clock. I'll talk to our panelists, and we will definitely be doing it at 10 o'clock tomorrow. And I'm sorry for the misunderstanding in the time today. And I figured all the technical issues out, and we got ready to go quick enough. And I hope if you have any questions that you will hit the back of this video. We will be adding it to the Masterson Trial playlist if you want to go check anything out that happened prior in the other ones. It'll all be there. And if you have any questions, just ask me. I will try to get you any answers that I can. I like to deal with you guys one-on-one, back and forth, get you all the information you need, just keeping you updated on it. I hope you enjoyed it. This one is now up to date until Monday. So on that, I'll say good night, and you all have a great Friday evening.